do we have some material to work through here? Give me a King's Gambit, and then we'll do the big issue, which is the Pies.
A friend of mine years ago, about 10, 12 years ago, Mark Opie at the Richmond Football Club, after we got a couple of injuries, he told me health is your best player. And at the time I thought, that's a flippant thing to say. Well, how can health be your best player? And then you look at what's happening in the competition right now, and even over the last couple of years, whether it's the start of the year or the end of the year, it's 100% correct. But when you start getting to the genuine pointy end of the year, the outs and the ins just become so important. So I think this is where the phys editors, the
phys editors,
or the strength and conditioning department, this is where they're worth their weight in gold. And we've talked a lot about the handling of Clayton Oliver over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Good, bad, indifferent, your own opinion. Some of it informed, some ill-informed. Him returning in pure health and being able to hit the ground running. So the Pappenhausen discussion of not just being available, but being available to perform.
Yep.
To coming back and being a 10 out of 10 player rather than limping in and needing 2 or 3 weeks to get rolling, coming in underdone. Bailey Fritsch, is he going to come back in ready to go? They lose Harrison Petty. So the management of him. So that if he is recalled first final, second final, third final, whenever it is, that he's absolutely right to go, that there's no recurrence of any other injury or any existing injury like the Oliver situation. So your man management becomes really critical. So Nick Dacos, everyone's saying, oh, look, he's only out for 6 weeks. So that'll bring him back, and they're just picking dates. If he only misses 4, pick a date. But what the handling of this guy in this month, he's 20 years of age. Like, he wouldn't have had this sort of trauma to his body before. So, look, there's so many unknowns with the strength and conditioning department having to do that. And Nathan Murphy's the one that no one's really talking about, which is a huge loss for 3 or 4 weeks of footy. So they're the ones we know. So I look at Collingwood, and you think that Gerard Wade, I think, is the guy that's down there in charge. The rest of the squad now, it's on a knife's edge now. They cannot lose 1 or 2 more. Like, imagine something happens to DeGoey, or something happens to Pendlebury, or something happens to Darcy Moore. Like, right now, this is it. They've maxed out with trauma. They cannot have any, with the games upcoming. I know they're trying to hang on to top spot because they want the dream run through the finals if they are to gather and go again. But I just think this is why you pay the big money for the strength and conditioning staff that you do, because every decision now is full steam ahead. One error and you cost a player a week or 2 weeks or the rest of the season, because that's what we start seeing now, out season. It's not 4 weeks, it's out season. So any injury is magnified, which is great. Full premierships are full club things. They're not just Craig McRae. They're not just Simon Goodwin or Chris Fagan. They're full club. So I'm fascinated to see how players are handled. If I was Craig McRae, I'd be taking less risk with players now, and I'd almost be prepared to not give away a game, but they're in a unique situation now. So do they have to manage the minutes of players? Do they have to be better in game? I looked at yesterday at the Melbourne Footy Club. Christian Petrarca spent the last 11 minutes of the last quarter on the bench. Jack Viney, he played 15 of the last 30 minutes. He spent the last 10 minutes on the bench. Max Gawn, they took him off for about 6 minutes. They put him back on for 3, and I reckon Goodwin said, what am I doing, Paul? What the hell's he doing back out there? Get him off. He spent the last 7 minutes on the bench, but really he only played 15 of the last 30. So the last quarter, Petrarca, Viney and Gawn, pretty much get them out of the game. And they had Stephen May on the bench for quite some time as well. So the management of your own and the handling of those that are returning is going to dictate how strong you are in a preliminary final, and that's all we talk about all year.
All right, so let's spin that further with the big issue being Collingwood and what we learnt out of Saturday, and everyone will have their own view how far they want to delve here. There'll be some drastic comments, I'm sure. Where do you sit with the toll of Saturday for Collingwood?
So everyone's going to have their opinion on what Nick Dacos represents. So he played the first 10 weeks of the year at halfback, and right now he's the 8th highest score involvement player in the competition. He's number 1 at Collingwood. So you just don't see that. Okay, so he's a major player in their scoring. So they set the game up for Dacos, essentially. So they've put him from the midfield, and then they've had to move him forward. When they look to run with players with him, it's get the ball to Dacos, do this, do that. So the major part of their planning goes into Dacos. It used to be De Goey. It used to be, do we centre forward? Do you have him on ball? Does he go in at centre bounce? All that sort of stuff. Once upon a time, it was Pendlebury. Now it's just sort of shifted down to Dacos. So his absence, they lose an elite kicker, they lose an elite runner, and a handball receiver that creates that wave. We see Collingwood get into a wave with their run, and they line out, if you like a rugby run, and they've always got that player lateral to them. Dacos is always in that wave. It's Dacos, De Goey, Josh Dacos, Nakos and Jacos, De Goey, Pendlebury if he can hang on, Crisp if he can go with them, Markov and the halfback flankers. You won't get that now. So it doesn't sound like much, but the extra runner, sometimes it's unrewarded running. Sometimes it's just another link in the chain. You won't have that, and I don't think that'll hit you until it's absent. I'll get to Will Ashcroft later on, but his absence is now hitting home. What are we missing here? So I'm not too concerned. Everyone says, but he gets a lot of uncontested. That's rubbish. He wins his own ball. He's not asked to run back with the flight. He's not asked to charge into Paddy Cripps because that's just a bad business decision. But he's asked to run and gun and create. So I don't know how much it'll impact them in terms of numbers, but what I do know is he is their most valuable player, and by some stretch.
What about the way teams are playing Collingwood?
Just before we leave Collingwood, so we put on the radar last. They've had problems with their game for a little while. So we've talked about them, and we've held strong, and we've known that Melbourne are coming, and Port have had their time. They've come off a little bit, and Brisbane have been thereabouts. But I do think we've worried about their numbers. So they've been trending as a team that's 5th, 6th, 7th in terms of the numbers, but they've been top of the table because they've won in different ways. They've won in situational play. They've won games in bursts, whether it be early or whether it be late, and on talent. Now Craig doesn't like hearing that, and that's fair. But they haven't had the profile. Their number profiling from about round 10 has dropped right off. Bulletproof at round 10, winning every contest, outnumbering, absorbing, going. Now there's some vulnerabilities down back with Murphy not being there now, but Moore getting beaten on occasion. They turn the ball over cold. Darcy Moore, when you play basketball, you have your rebounders, and then you don't see the big rebounders dribble the ball like a point guard down the ground. Darcy Moore's trying to be a rebounder and a point guard. Mate, you win the ball back and you give it to the guys who explode and excite and can kick the footy. He's turned the ball over a lot. Maynard's now biting off targets that are beyond him. So everyone's trying to be the man. So it's been a bit of a dangerous space. I look at Tom Mitchell. He's lost his passion for contest and clearance. I look at Brodie Mychek. He looks to me like, not that he's lost his passion for contest, he's lost his ability to win contest. So I haven't seen him just take control of that forward line for a little while. McStay's come in and been pretty solid, but been inaccurate, and so too Brodie. And I questioned last night, and we're not going at Collingwood players. We're not. These are the realities, and these are the things that have got to sharpen if there to be any chance in a final series. Is Scott Pendlebury still a centre bounce clearance player? If you can be a fraction slower than the rest in there, it's an area for dancers. It's a dance floor in there, Jerry. Right? If you can't dance, you can't be a centre bounce player. So if you're a fraction on the slow side, you have to be the hit two player. So the ball's coming to you because if it doesn't go to you, it goes somewhere else. You've got to be able to recover over 3 metres in an instant, or you've got to be able to burst through a hole in an instant. Everything's at full speed at centre bounce. It's 4-on-4. It's cutthroat stuff. And I'm just starting to see some separation where, and it was Nash yesterday, it was Newcomb at time, that a metre becomes 2, becomes 3, becomes 4 really quickly. Now, he's an elite player. He's going to be an elite player going forward. But I just don't think he's a centre bounce player, which is a real challenge now that Nick Dacos is out. So who do you put in there? So I think there's a lot of concerns at Collingwood. And all balls are in the air, and maybe that challenges the coach in a different. This is a guy that's hardly. I mean, he's lost 6 of his last 35 games or something. So like the loss is not something they're familiar with really, but they're being challenged on all fronts, and they've got not much time to find solution.
So this is typically the time where we're seeing teams button up for their run at it, not come undone, isn't it? The last handful of weeks of the home and away.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, Horny and I said it's the runway. So the last 4 weeks, you want to be in good order, know which talent you're going to use where. You can still tinker with the way you play and to beat a certain opponent, but the core of how you play is embedded in that group. You hope to be reasonably healthy, and you hope to have evolved again. So most teams change the way they play 2-3 times through the course of a given season. You don't want to be doing it walking into it, against games against the best at the pointy end. So it is a relative disaster for Collingwood to be challenged in such a way with their best talent. Their prime mover at centre half back and Nick Dacos, their most important player, felled at round 21.
So just for clarity here, so you've been 1A on the Collingwood ship.
Yeah.
You haven't sniffed smoke and gone for the parachute, have you?
I think injuries stop anyone, Jared. Look, I don't know whether they can regather and go, but I do know that it's now a lot harder than what it was Friday afternoon. So if you could choose one player to not get injured, it would be Nick Dacos. So you have to reassess, don't you? I mean, the facts change. And you look at what Melbourne are doing, and they've got returning stars. They're probably the one now in the prime position. And a lot of Melbourne fans will say, well, we've been there for a while. You just haven't recognised it. But and they're probably right. But on the data that we track, with the footy, without the footy, your ability to score from clearance more than the opposition and winning contests in general play. So those 4 pillars, the core 4 we call them, Carlton are actually the best team in the comp right now on the core 4 for the last 6 weeks. Now, they're probably the best ranked 5th team we've seen for a little while. So the season is so open, but they're not going to be in the top 4. So can they still win it from there, or can they still win finals? Can they hold this form? Can they play their way? So there's just so many things that are up in the air at round 21. I can't remember a season like it.
So just run me through Sam Mitchell and the Hawks and what they got right in just what was a thrilling performance.
They were exceptional, weren't they? And I often look at their ability to spread, so to win ball and then spread. They got the 2 of the most watchable midfielders in the competition right now, Newcombe and Day. I can't stop watching their impact on games. The fact that Newcombe was, outside of the AFL system at his age until he was grabbed by the boys from, straight out of Box Hill, which Sam was coaching anyway, it's just amazing that you can have that calibre of player on the edge. So their clearance, they smash them at clearance. So the clearance numbers don't reflect the smashing, but the scores from clearance do. 45 points to 22. That's a huge number, and so it's hard to go past that. I look at Sicily and what he was able to do again. 11 intercepts, and we talked last week about the diffuser. If you haven't got a diffuser, and we'll get to that discussion later on, but to allow Sicily to do his own thing, I thought was pretty poor from the coaching group of Collingwood. But let's give Sam some love. They just don't give you the ball back, Hawthorn. Their handball game is so strong. Their desire to run and overlap. They brain them at centre bounce clearance. 18-3. 18-3. Like you wouldn't
see that number.
You wouldn't think you could get that 4v4. And okay, the ball bobbles and bounces everywhere, but 18-3?
Yep. Like,
I don't know of the last time I've seen a disparity like that. Most of the damage, again, was from the 2 I just mentioned. And Nash, who we've mentioned a lot this year, just has these games where he just looks bigger than the other. He looks like Bontempelli in clearance. And then just do some different thing. He's just different player. Like there's sometimes you go, how do you? He'll turn the ball over and you go, what are you seeing there? And then 5 minutes later, do something quite brilliant. You say, okay, we got to win on the swing and lose on the merry-go-round with this guy. But he had 30 plus again, and I just thought they were exceptional with what they did. Some of their tools, they're just presenting perfectly. Ryan. He's 25, I think, 25 years of age. Brandon Ryan. He's only played a couple of games. The left footer, the tall left footer, kicked 3 goals. He's another find. I don't know how they're finding these guys. So the recruiting department at Hawthorn have done a terrific job. And what it does do, it gives you confidence. And everyone wants to talk about 3 years down the track. I just want to talk about right now.
Yep.
That they've stamped the group. Sam Mitchell, he made a comment earlier in the year where he said, "I've got the bulk of the premiership group right here already." So I'm just sort of ticking off the names as we go down. So work with me for a sec. Moore will be there. Don't know about Bruce. Lewis will be there. Newcomb will be there. Weddle will be there. Day will be there. Warple will be there. And then you're starting to get down there. Will Sicily be there? I don't know. Wingard, probably not. Nash, probably. Scrimshaw, I don't know. Ward, Mackenzie, all these guys. Then there's these guys we haven't really seen yet. They got some guys that are high draft picks that are still gathering fitness bases and all that sort of stuff. 1-2 more preseasons. So I'm really excited that he's probably got 10 of the 22 that'll be there grand final day in 3-4 years, if that's the plan. You got to plan for these things. So I've been encouraged, and it takes real bravery to do what they've done as a footy club, but they're now seeing it, I think, quicker than what they would have expected.
What they got right, Sam Mitchell and the Hawks for Loop Logics, the future of construction management. For a free demo, visit looplogics.com. The best bit, well, that was Carlton. It was so perfectly set up at halftime. Sit the test of Ross. Are you mature enough? Are you sophisticated enough? Are you nerveless enough to come through? In April, nowhere near. In August, flying colours.
Vossi's group went away from where they were strong for a while. They weren't threatening at stoppage in terms of threatening gaps. They were accepting that the pressure was too good for them all the time, and they were dump kicking or making error or evacuating too quickly. And the bloke that won the ball had no friends around him. Their back line were playing their own individual matchup. It was 6 one-on-ones. It was back shoulder. It was, I'm going to beat my man. I'm not going to get beaten. We might not win today, but my man's not going to kick 6. He's not going to be the reason. Now the mindset shifts. We've got to be violent at stoppage. So Paddy Cripps has gone back to his brutal best. And now they step through. And if they don't get through and they get nabbed, well, they get nabbed. Wiedering's become Glenn Jakovic. Bulletproof at centre-half back, playing a little bit higher than what he once did, intercepting everything. And if he doesn't intercept, he doesn't get beaten. And then they reset and start again. Forward of centre, they got this guy, and I won't get to the specifics of yesterday's game. The minute he saw the extra defender roll back in front of him, Charlie Curnow, I think he could have turned his toes up and said, this is going to be a horrible day. Now, most players don't think like that, but the top liners certainly don't. He fought tooth and nail all day, knowing there would be little reward coming. There were times where he had his moment. He outmarked the two of them on a wing, reel and go, got it in quickly. I think once he got it to Owies, and I think the other time was another small, may have been Motlop, and they got goals from that sliding wingman down the other side, or that sliding half-forward flanker. There were times where he just brought it to ground, and I thought, this is team footy. This is one of the special performances from Charlie Curnow that won't be recognised on a stat sheet. But I think internally today, they would show every one of his efforts to just bring the ball to ground to give him a secondary opportunity. So I thought that was terrific. So what he allows is for Carlton to have the extra at the stoppage. If he just cold gets beaten all day, right? And I know they made adjustments after halftime, but if he just gets cold beaten all day, then they're in real trouble. So at halftime, Vossi says, well, we can't, we have to do something. We have to do something to try and spark some scoring. We're chasing the scoreboard now. And then their clearance crew go crazy. There's some things you can't stop with Carlton. And I know people are at pains to point out who wasn't there. And you made a great point during the break. It's now not about who's not there at Carlton. This is how we play. You've got to be violent if you're going to be in the clearances. If you're going to be a handball receiver, you've got to be pure with the ball. You've got to make the right decisions at the right time. And the Hollands messages coming through thick and fast. Ollie Hollands was terrific. Everyone's just doing their role. It's role mastery, right? So this is your role. Master that role today. There's still some things to iron out, and the better talent coming back in will do that. with greater class. But I was just pumped for how they played. There's a guy I want to mention, and we don't talk enough about. And there's some danger in his game too. Cottrell.
Yes.
Cottrell. Like, he does some things, Jared. I don't know whether he's a fan favourite with the Carlton group or not, but just really exciting. But again, it just comes back to your leaders. I thought they were terrific. Vossi's weathered the storm. How far can they go?
Yeah.
Give me your early thoughts on when they will pack up stumps, when their season will finish.
They'll be in a preliminary final.
A prelim?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. That's big.
Yep. So while teams up above them have got sort of insecurities that are opening up, they have refined their game. So the two hesitations about them, I think, for a long time where they were hostage to who was on the ground, it was this eternal wait for 22 stars. And they were fluky, so they were enormously exciting, but they were just as likely to concede 6 goals in 10 minutes and lose the game. Both of those issues have been resolved.
Yeah.
So they have a proper system in place, and they have the hard knocks from the middle of the year to make them grateful and hungry. I reckon that's a really interesting combination right now.
And the hard conversations. We chatted about this a couple of weeks ago. There's a risk when you're going terribly, losing games. Not going terribly, I should reword that. You're being challenged on all fronts. There's quite a few things going wrong. There's some of all parts were sort of just a fraction off. And then you sit down with your leaders and you have those hard conversations. Hey, we need you to be this. Because that can go the other way. The bottom can fall out of your whole program. When you challenge people and they don't accept that challenge, they don't accept that it's their issue, which happens regularly with proud people, but they all embraced it. I just think that the torchbearer for that is Jacob Wiedering. The way that he's transformed his game has transformed Carlton. Patrick Cripps has always been that clearance player. He wasn't as violent in the middle patch of the year as what he is now and what he was at the start of the year, but Wiedering's the big change.
Did Ross lose the tactical battle?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? So at halftime, you'd say, "Yep, no, he's given Vossi the standing 8 count." So the extra number behind the ball is actually helping them hold up. But in the end, you are going to concede more inside 50s if you give the opposition an extra number around the stop. Normally, Melbourne go they fight against the odds at clearance all the time because teams roll the extra up to cover. So you get a luxury of the extra defender then. So that's part of their plan. Did Ross? No, I don't think anyone lost the battle of tactics. This is the way we set the game up to win. And I just think in the end, and people will say, I know who they had out. I still think Carlton had the better list out there on the ground. So if you ask me which team I would like to coach of the two magnet sets going into that game, you're probably still choosing Carlton. So I thought Ross did a great job in giving them an avenue to victory, a way to win, which worked for 70 of the 120 minutes. But in the end, when it turned, Vossi had the game, pretty much. He rolled the seventh. He rolled to have 7v7 in Carlton's forward line. He couldn't concede the extra backman all day, Vossi. So he said, "Nah, wingman, you go back and play on their natural wing, who's sliding back and releasing Battle or Wilkie to be the extra." So it was really good coaching on both fronts. You don't necessarily have to lose tactically to get beaten. I thought they both coached their teams really well. Both gave avenues for victory, and Carlton were just too good.
So they stay in PFI for us, David King. Preliminary final integrity with Melbourne.
So the last fortnight, so just look at the forward 50 targets. So I think they had worked it out. And Gary Lyon, credit to him, has been big on this. That they don't need a big name down there. They don't need Grundy or Gawn. They just need a competitor. Now, who that was up for grabs. Was Tomlinson going to be that guy? Was Smith going to be that guy? Was it going to be Petty? Was it going to be? Do you go back to Brown? I mean, there's just been this constant spinning of the magnets, and rightly so, because the season's about finding out until you know, and when you know, you know. So the last 2 weeks, Harrison Petty's been targeted 17 times, and the team score a goal one in every 2.5. That's a big return. Big return. And he converts from anywhere. Like, he kicked a couple of goals yesterday from the boundary. Like, he was just marking the ball and getting it from wide. Now, Melksham's the other one. Melksham's the wild card. I love Melksham in the forward line. I think he's a bit of a jack of all trades. He could have got 4 free kicks yesterday. He got none. But that's just sometimes your lot as that type of player. Who do they go with the tool? Do they throw Smith forward, bring Tomlinson in and put him down back? Do they just swing Tomlinson in and put him forward? Do they go back to Ben Brown? Is he healthy enough, Ben Brown? I don't think he is. I don't think they'll go to Grundy. I think I just get the feeling that they've made the decision that really hasn't worked. So why would it then work in a final? But in saying that, I do think if you're listing Simon Goodwin's priorities, who their forward 50 target is well down the list. It's win contest. It's defend hard. Get the prime movers where they need to be. Jack Viney. So Harrison Petty. Hey, if he's out for 4 weeks, so be it. But when he's healthy and right to go, back to our strength and conditioning department, he'll be straight back into that role. So I think he's one they would bring back in for a prelim.
Yep.
Having not played for a substantial period of time. This is where these sorts of injuries creep into other players. So the Petrarca role now. So Petrarca, in my opinion, has always been their best forward. In the absence of Fritsch. Fritsch is their best goal-kicking forward. And then Petrarca's the one you can't match up against. He's the wild card. So this probably impacts his minutes. So when Oliver comes back, I think you expect that Petrarca would go back to the 60% midfield, 40% forward type mix, which he's tracked away from. When he first went down there, he went 4 goals, and then Goody's moved his magnet more and more back into the middle. But the one thing they have discovered is Jack Viney's best form, and it gives him some opportunity to explore a little bit, I think, with Clayton Oliver. Remember when Richmond were great? They had Dustin Martin and Trent Cotchin swapping on ball full forward because they're just contest winners. They just understand the game and what's required. So Viney, I called him the torchbearer of toughness last night. So since round 16, only Bontempelli has provided more inside 50 opportunities than Jack Viney. Only Libba, Merritt and Goulden have had more disposals. So he's fourth for disposals, but he does it in a different way. There's no uncontested stuff with him. He's top 10 in that period for contested possessions. He's top 15 for clearance. He's top 20 for tackles. He's doing all the stuff no one wants to do. He subscribes week in, week out to be the guy at the bottom of the pack. It's Libba and Jack Viney that are that far in front as the toughest players in the comp. It's not funny. So I think that gives you some luxuries with Oliver. Do you need to overinvest in the midfield? I think Melbourne fall for that trap. They go Viney, Oliver, Petrarca. There's only so many clearances that can be won. There's only so many contested balls that can be won in that area.
Yep.
So how you spend your wealth, how you move, where you have your prime pieces on the chessboard, is the balancing it. And Brayshaw's been really good in the middle as well. So I wonder how much they'll disrupt what they're doing for Oliver, who's a Hall of Famer. So they've got a different problem to other clubs. It's about maximising their weapons in whatever area of the ground. I don't think I've ever seen Clayton Oliver play forward. I don't think I've ever seen it. Well, maybe that's worth a look, 50-50, just to not disrupt what they're doing in the middle. Don't know, but it's a great problem to have, and I love the way Melbourne play. When they're in this frame of mind, to defend first, Lever had 3 kicked on him in the first quarter yesterday, but Eddie Ford was tagging him, and then he bounced back. Last 3 quarters, bulletproof. Stephen May's hard to beat, and they just use Smith as that pawn defender. You go deep when we need you to go deep. If someone gets off the chain, they'll probably put him to him. So, no, I think they're in great nick.
We were fooling around with the ladder predictor last week, and you said to me, I said to you, I can get Melbourne to second. I just didn't realise it would be this soon. They're at second now.
Where'd you have them on your seedings last week?
2.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You got them to second ahead of time. Look at you go.
They're about to bump up too.
Are they?
They are. All right, let's do the pressure index. Port Adelaide and Ken Hinkley. So hugely admirable on Saturday night. They've lost 4 in a row. It's worth just going through the sequence. Brought half a team to Melbourne, got whacked by Carlton, sort of took their medicine that day. Played the game of the year against Collingwood and came up a whisker short. Were flat as attack in a showdown where they never looked likely. And again were condemned to bring half a team to Geelong and looked for good portions of the second half like they were going to win. But they have lost 4 in a row and there's a certain degree of free fall that comes with that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Scotty Muller about him at the moment. They can't bat, can't bowl, can't throw. I'm not sure what their weapon is. Hey, they were admirable. They were very good down at Geelong. But Geelong were gettable. Geelong have probably never been more gettable at Geelong than what they were on the weekend. Without Hawkins, without Blitzarves, and the names keep going. Guthrie, you can go through the whole host of them. So they were gettable on the weekend, and I know Port had a stack of players out, and it was a good game to watch. It was. But this is all about where they're likely to finish and what that does to them. So Port on the road this year have been pretty good. 6 and what are they? I think they got a very good record, but the likelihood is they're going to have to travel to either the MCG or the Gabba in the first week of the finals. So they've won their last 2 at the G against Essendon and Richmond, I think, but they've only won 2 of their last 6. At the Gabba, they've lost the last 4 against Brisbane. So versus Brisbane at the Gabba, they've lost their last 4. So this is the challenge now. Winning big finals, they're probably going to have to be on the road where you were just hoping that they'd find a way to hang on to second. Well, that looks gone to me now. Now they've just got a challenge of health, getting healthy. Again, same discussion as what we were talking about with Collingwood before. I'd be just managing the minutes of some, just ensuring there's no more trauma. They've got quite a few to come back into the team. They'll be okay talent-wise, but it's now just a management issue. I think they're going to finish 3rd or 4th. Simple as that, isn't it?
Yep.
Which is a pretty good effort, but to win the thing. So I had a quick look at the teams. So the Premiers the last few years, you got to win you pretty much have to win week 1 of the final. So over the last, what have we got, 5 years, 2, 4, say 6 years, finishing top 4 and winning that first final. So if you finish 3rd, you've got to beat second first week. So Geelong obviously won straight through. Melbourne won straight through, despite the fact that it was Adelaide then at Optus. Brisbane finished 3rd and got rolled first week in 2020 by Richmond got rolled by Brisbane. Richmond won at the Gabba in 2019. West Coast defeated Collingwood first week. 2017, Richmond won the first week of the MCG against Geelong. So I think if you're going to finish 3rd, it's all chips in to get yourself healthy and primed for week 1 of the finals if you are to finish 3rd. And I think if you lose that, I reckon you're gone. So that's why I've got the slows on Port Adelaide, because I don't think a team's ever won it from 4th, have they? I don't think since the turn of the century any team's won it from 4th.
I've got a little grid on that in one of my books. I'll have a look before.
You got a book on that?
Yeah, I've got all sorts of different things in various places.
Okay, all right.
So the 2000 year is the one where the 2020 year, that Geelong and Richmond both lost the qualifying final, both won the preliminary final.
Yeah.
So they walked the hard road,
yeah,
and they both won through. That's an asterisk year for all sorts of different reasons, the COVID year.
And then the Dogs year. The Dogs year of 2016 ruins anything you talk about.
That's right. That's the pattern. Maybe that's the exception that proves the rule. All right, so the pressure is on Port Adelaide. They've got this nasty little game against the Giants too. The end of the round on Sunday at Adelaide Oval. Giants are such a physical team. They're coming off their own disappointment, which we're going to delve into in a few moments' time. I've got a correspondent who says 2015, the Hawks would have won it from 4th.
They did. They got rolled in. That was the West Coast final.
Yeah,
so you're going back a few years there.
Yeah.
And I still, those 3 to 4 years with the new teams coming in, I think if you're a very good team, there was only, I don't want to talk down the Hawks at all, Jerry. Don't want any feedback today.
No, not to that correspondent.
No,
I wouldn't talk them down.
No, I'm not. But it was a strange phase of our journey. Free agency had just come in. The new teams had just come in, so the draft it was a good time to be good, Jared.
It was
We've always had around 21, though, Jared.
Yeah. But it was the overlooked factor in our season that we were going to play 23.
Can you tell what difference did that make to the performance on the
weekend?
weekend?
No, not to the weekend. But I think we're seeing teams ploughing into the wall at the moment. And Essendon was one of those teams. They've looked tired for a few weeks. I was so interested.
Because of gather round.
Sitting at home watching.
It can't be because of gather round, Jared.
No, it's an additional game has made a difference to the load.
We haven't got to the additional game yet.
No, we haven't. So the curiosity was,
why are we talking about the additional game?
what happened in that game? So early in the third quarter, it sort of turned.
Yeah.
And then West Coast totally dominated the rest of the game. And I'm at home watching Yo and Kelly both get nothing from their set shots. I think they might have both hit the behind post. They both kicked it out on the full.
Yeah.
I'm watching Oscar Allen miss a sitter that he's kicked all year. And I'm watching, was it Jamie Williams dropped a sitter of a mark 15 metres out. And going, okay, so West Coast left 2 goals to cold on the table in a game that ends up being decided by a point.
It was a strange game because any way you want to look at the game, Essendon just win it comfortably. But because West Coast were able to bounce the ball out of their defensive 50, they kicked something like, it was 7 goals from defensive 50. They only kicked 11 for the day. 7 of them went full length of the ground for goals. So that's always been Essendon's problem, is they can't stop opposition ball movement. So you get a chance. You play basketball against Essendon. Right? And the Essendon fans hate hearing it, but it's still there. Against the worst team that we've probably seen for some time, they are able to run you to 1 point just because you couldn't stop them moving the footy. But to talk about the positives at Essendon for a minute, I love what their captain's doing. He's next level with his leadership at the moment. We talk a lot about he's demanding more of other players and all that sort of stuff. But just see it game day. He made a big tackle. He laid a big tackle mid-last quarter when the game was sliding and then barked at all of his teammates. Just whoever was in the area got a clip. And I thought it was just terrific to try and spark a response. Langford kept doing what he's been doing all year. He's just become a cold, in-your-face, I will defeat you style forward. Just a basic lead. He's a big frame. He's not overly quick, but gee, he's hard to play on. He had full control of Elliot Yeo, and Yeo did some really special things late in terms of some of the defensive actions. But Langford's, Brad's got put on the radar in the pre-game with Jason Dunstall that he should be in the All-Australian team, and it's hard to argue when you look at what he's been able to do this season. No one really gives Darcy Parish the love that he should get. I thought he was enormous in terms of providing avenues for Essendon to score. And in the end, they were just too. Nick Hines had a very good game again. His run and carry's so important. But the tackle that I was talking about with Merritt, he lays the big tackle. I can't think who it was. Someone was running around in circles just waiting to be tackled.
Yes, yeah.
And he nailed him.
No, I can picture the one.
And he stopped everyone. He said, right, settle down. And then he lateral kicked the ball to Mason Regman, who fixed the bloke on the mark, ran around him and knocked it through from 52, 53. And I thought, well, that there is why those two are the best leaders you've got at this football club. Game really in the balance, boom. And credit to them, you often lose those games. There was 100 seconds left on the clock and they were behind. And it was like, wow. You could really freeze here. You could get beaten. You could get beaten by the circumstance.
Yep.
We're getting beaten by the West Coast Eagles on our home ground, and I know there's only a minute and a half to go. Like, you could just seize up with that sort of pressure and tension. So I say, well done. A great win in the end. Mackenzie really important with that last goal. That crumb was perfect. And I just can't picture who it was, but someone, it might have even been Merritt. He basically took the ball out of the hands of Tim Kelly at the stoppage. A lot's been made of, was it a straight throw up or was it on an angle or whatever, but let's just talk about the spilt ball at ground level. It had to be won and they won it. So it was a great game to watch.
It was.
Very entertaining game.
For a game that, you could have let go by to capture the drama from about the 5 or 6 minute mark of the third quarter all the way through, and it's sustained the whole way. Is West Coast outplayed them for that whole period of time. And are they ever going to get to the front here? And then Marek puts them in front with his story as well.
Crazy.
And then Essendon go and win it straight back. So what of West Coast?
Well, much of the same. I think Tim Kelly's just shown why we review what he's done, and Cripps, he just knows how to hit the scoreboard. Got a couple of youngsters that I think Jeremy McGovern, you need to talk about McGovern. He's played 6 games for the year, but when he plays, he has the ability to shut down the opposition forward 50. He was pulling pieces he's moving all these defenders around to free himself up. and at times he was taking Peter Wright, and then he wasn't. So it was just he was great to watch. I think Noah Long's going to be a real player. I saw Chester do some things which is really exciting. Elijah Hewitt. Yeah, he was very good through periods of the game. So there's a lot to like about some of their young kids. And the word from Perth is that they've got 6 to 8 that they're really, really happy with. And the rebuild is not as deep as what people keep saying, but because they've had no senior core players around them, they're getting exposed for all the things they're not, rather than supported to be all the things they are.
Yeah.
So that's a sticky one for them, and they're just where they are. We all know where the West Coast are at. They're going to battle for a little while, but let's wait and see if they can mount a charge quickly and who they purge at the end of the season.
They got that wrong, so you wanted to pick from the Sydney Giants game. You raised the diffuser last week and how the diffuser was used and not used.
Yeah, so to defeat the GWS Giants, the only asset the Giants have got in terms of stumping up against the best in the comp is they defend their back 50 better than anyone in the league. So you've got to get through Buckley and you've got to get through Taylor. And then on the edges, there's experience like Whitfield's there. Ash has become a player. Iden's become a serious defender. So there's enough around the edges to allow them to hold up. So what they did was that they sent Amati to Taylor. And then when Amati was off the ground, they'd send Hayward to Taylor. So they effectively tagged the interceptor. And it worked very much like King versus Harris Andrews the previous week in a different game. So if you don't have a way of competing with the interceptor, then you play their game. So in the end, the Swans got beaten for clearance and the ball lived in their defensive 50. But when they won the ball, they come out at speed. So the Giants didn't have a very good forward half pressure game at all for the day. If they did, they win the game. But because they bounced out at speed, Taylor all of a sudden has 3 acres of space and a one-on-one matchup. That's a disaster for any defender in the comp. So in the end, it was the coach. You don't coach to lose stoppage. You never coach to lose stoppage. But you can coach to, hey, we're going to go at full speed. We're going to charge. And Joel Amati, you just get busy. You just run loops and figure eights and wrap around and tick leads back at the ball carrier and just challenge him to defend the whole 360 degrees. If they slowed the game down, Taylor gets great location, Buckley gets great location, You can't beat them. So I thought it was a really good coaching game. I think Adam Kingsley will be disappointed he didn't hold an extra behind the ball at times to give those guys some support. But again, another high-quality game that tactically favoured the Swans in the end.
And the one rider to the seedings are, do your own. Don't get angry about ours. Just do your own. It's a very personal thing.
It's a personal.
So last week
it gets very personal.
Oh, yeah. Last week I dropped Brisbane and Port out and said if they win, you go straight back in. So Brisbane have gone back in and Port are going to have to sit till they win. So this is connoisseur's choice here as to what you're doing. 4.
Collingwood.
Oh, right.
It's a big slide. I understand that.
You sort of had that magnet super glued.
Jared, I'm not happy to say it, but it's the reality, isn't it? I think it's the reality that they lose their best player, the Brownlow medal favourite, the guy that is their offence. They lose their centre-half back. They're going to have to rediscover so much of who they are. They're a victim of this trauma at round 21.
Brisbane Lions are at 4 for me. That was a trapdoor game. They could so easily have fallen through it. And for most of the day, it looked like they would. But they won gritty, and that's been an addition to the Lions' makeup. So they're back in for me. I've got Collingwood at 3 for a lot of the reasons you've identified. 3?
Carlton, last 6 weeks, second best team with the footy, third best team without it, smashing teams at clearance, the best team in the comp. And they win contest around the ground, third best in the comp. They are charging. It's just a shame for them. They're going to be outside the top 4, making it incredibly hard to win the flag.
Yeah, you've underclubbed on Carlton. They're at 2. With the
Underclubbed.
footy that they're playing at the moment, with what they've been able to
They're at
build,
2.
they're at 2. On the footy that they're playing right now, they sit at 2 for me.
Wow.
2 for you?
I got Brisbane at 2. I think the road is mapped to the grand final. I think the biggest challenge for them right now is replacing Will Ashcroft.
Yep.
He has left such an absence. I think his value for the rising star has gone up
Yep.
with him not playing.
Yep. And you've got one date pegged for them, don't you?
I have.
It's
I
in
have.
2 Friday nights' time.
It's 2 Friday nights' time. I wrote this down, Jared, and I now can't find it. 7:50, August 18, 740 Burke Street, Docklands. That is the game that Brisbane must win. If they're to win the flag this year, they must beat Collingwood at Marvel.
And the one seed for both of us is
The D's.
for Melbourne for all the reasons we identified in PFI. It's coming together for them. They're not a bulletproof one, but they are one right now.
740 Burke Street, August 18, Jared.